My topic tonight is Confessions of a Public School Failure. So this is a story about failure and risk in public schools, where the failure lived, where the risks happened, and what came out after those. This is a personal story, so I hope you'll deal with my voice cracking if it happens. I started school. As a young man, I felt very creative, and I felt engaged, and I felt trusting with my students. And these were very important factors to my success. As I was doing well in school, these feelings just kept growing and growing in me. The problem was that in fourth grade that changed, and that entire story is much longer and more involved and frankly internally tortuous than I want to go through. But the point is that something changed in fourth grade for me, and I stopped being creative, I stopped being engaged in school, and I stopped being trusting of teachers. This was the litany that haunted me for 8 years. If he would only apply himself, was what every teacher told me. And that was a load of crap as far as I was concerned, because I was applying myself. It was 1985. The Commodore 64 was the biggest machine on the planet, and I was learning how to program. I had computer programming skills like no other in my school. And this is how I learned how to program. I read magazines on my own. They had programs on them, and that's how I learned BASIC. But that wasn't what was happening for me in school. I was living in an environment of distrust and unhappiness. In my first senior year, I wanted out. But I needed to raise up my grades. This is Mr. Maier. Mr. Maier was a teacher at Sandia High School, and he was also the computer lab teacher. And what I needed was a good grade, and what he taught was basic programming. And I thought, hey, I can take his class and I can get an easy A. So his first assignment to us was to write a simple program in BASIC, and this is how I knew how to program in BASIC, and boy, could I ever do this. This is called spaghetti code, but it's what I knew, and I was really good at it. And so I actually turned my homework in, I was proud of it, and I was waiting for the next day, and this is what was typed up on the computer lab the next day. He literally wrote, "Never do this," on my paper, and taped it up, and I was so pissed off. I was like, why are you doing this to me? It works. It ran without error. What? He said, well, I'm going to make you a deal. It's obvious that you know BASIC, and I can teach you what you need in a week, and you'll get an easy A, and you can slide, and that's fine with me if that's what you want. But if you help me in my class, you don't have to do any work. You don't have to do your homework. I'll give you an easy A. All I ask is that if somebody has a question in the computer lab and they raise their hand, you go and help them. And I said, yes, deal. He was taking a risk. I was a failure, and he was elevating me to the level of a teaching assistant. And this is not what I did. This wasn't in the curriculum. This wasn't something the administrators signed off on. He just made a choice, and he took a risk. He was creative with me, he was engaging with me, and he was trusting of me. He saw that I could do it, and he let me do it despite all the evidence that I was willing to present to him that I was a shitty student. What came of that was I was invested in my own learning again. I was invested in doing something at school. I felt confidence. I was getting peer respect. My fellow students looked at me like he's the guy who's going to get left behind. But after that, I still was this guy who got left behind. Pretty suave, eh? But I was mentoring my peers in something I was really good at. I was getting crappy grades everywhere else, but there I was succeeding. I was creative, and I was engaged with my own learning. I was trustworthy. And what happened after I got done with my second year? I wanted in. I started understanding how education could really work for me. So, in my shitty little fast food job that you get when you don't succeed in public schools, I decided to start working, and here's where I ended up. This is the University Honors Program, and for my honors thesis, what I did for a year was I taught these kids, people who were my peers, comparative literature, and I graduated with honors with a magna cum laude. Thank you. This is my fourth grade class that I taught as an APS teacher. Thank you. I love these kids, and this one right here is actually the daughter of one of my high school buddies who was used to seeing me as a failure. I started an instructional design, or an instructional design consulting business called See Yourself Teaching. Told you I'd tell you about those guys. Here I am teaching international Pakistani dignitaries how to run a lab safely, and over there I was teaching the Asian Family Center folks how to build community in Albuquerque for first-generation immigrants. If you want to turn around failing schools, you don't need a gigantic change in your curriculum. You don't need a magic bullet. I'm sorry, Mark, it was part of my presentation. But what you need to do is encourage your teachers to take creative risks, engage with their students meaningfully, and be able to make choices that will show them as trustworthy, not just turnkey solutions. I invited Mr. Maier to be here. He couldn't be here for family reasons. I'm sorry to say that. But my biggest message today is thank you, Mr. Maier, for saving my life.